Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. Imagine you entered a memory championship and you accidentally became the national champion. There's this book that I read a long time ago. It's called Walking with Einstein, and it's by Joshua Furr. Joshua is not what you'd consider someone who has a really good memory, but he's writing a book. So he wants to do his research, and he goes across and meets with all the memory champions. Well, not all, but many of them. And these memory champions, they have a system, or they have multiple systems. And they reveal those systems to Joshua. Now, Joshua Furr doesn't see himself as a memory champion. He doesn't remember where he's kept his keys or his skis, or he doesn't remember his sister's birthday. But as the story goes, he goes through the championships and then goes to the semis and the finals, and then he wins the top prize. When we encounter this kind of story, we run into two kinds of people. The first kind of person says, I don't want to become a memory champion, but I will become a champion. I will become a champion of memory in my personal life. They don't say, I'll try to remember the name. They decide that they're going to remember the names. Once you decide that you'll have a better memory, your brain decides to play along. If you tell your brain all day long that you cannot remember names, your brain agrees, and it says, you cannot remember names. It doesn't even try. But what about a situation when it does try? Most of us grew up remembering phone numbers. I knew dozens of phone numbers when I was a kid. My home number, my father's office number, and a lot of random numbers, but also specific ones. For instance, I had to remember Renuka's number because I had to call her a lot. However, today, I can't remember a single number. Well, I can remember one number, and that's my mobile number, but that's it. If you took me over the Victoria Falls and threatened to drop me, I couldn't tell you Renuka's number, or I couldn't tell you my father's number, or anybody's number for that matter. But if you ask Renuka what's my number, then she will tell you my number. And that's because she's been putting that number in all the forms, giving it out to hairdressers, and I get all these calls and texts. So she remembers my number. But interestingly, for a while, she didn't know her own number. She does now. So we have this situation where we could do these feats of memory, even if they were small feats of memory, and we can't do them now. When we look around us, we notice that memory has nothing to do with being young. All of the young people in your life may know their own number, but they have no recollection of any other number. With no need to remember any details, the brain just chooses never to pay attention in the first place. But if you want to remember, there is a way. Memory is just a function of relating something to another thing. So when you see someone like Jack, well, the name might be really commonplace and you might think, well, I'll remember that, but you don't. And you have to put some sort of picture to it. This is what I do when I go to take photographs because photography is my hobby. So I went to a curtain company the other day, and you don't know this to be accurate, but I can remember all the names. The first two people I met were Aaron and Sergei from Ukraine, and then Hilda came downstairs, and I know because I asked her name. The person who introduced us to the team is the company owner, and his name is John. Then I met with the guy who's going to put up the curtains in our house, and his name is Simon. And I met with Riley and Bo, who were putting up the tracks for the curtains. And you can't see what's happening in my head right now, but I can see their faces, and I know where I met them and the location and how I went about remembering these things. What's interesting is that it's not a feat of memory. It's just me telling myself that I have to remember, and therefore I have to work out some system to remember things. Now, there is a possibility that there is some kind of brain defect and people can't remember, but most of us are not like that. We choose not to remember. We make excuses not to remember. And there's a good chance that you don't have a system to remember anything. And in doing so, you let the information pass by. I know letting the information pass by sounds blasé, but that's how it is. We know this to be true because you can remember names. You know the names of your cousins, your friends, your parents, your relatives, your teacher, maybe the teacher in first grade. You know the names of presidents, of dictators. You know the names of all the people that you choose to remember. Someone like Putin may have zero relevance in your life, but you know his first name and you know his last name. The ones that you choose not to remember slip away almost immediately. The same concept applies to any learning that you do, but there is a big difference. Usually when you're learning, you have to cope with a lot of information, and it comes all at once. Depending on the complexity, you could take days or weeks or months to get the information into permanent memory. If there's too much information, your brain skips over the details and you wonder how you forgot it. You then place yourself in a box and it's called people with a bad memory. You think you have a bad memory, but the reality is that your brain did not assimilate that information in the first place. That's not a memory problem. That's an assimilation problem. It's because we get several waves of information in any presentation or even in a tiny article. Not remembering all that information is not a memory issue at all. All audio, all video, all text, it's designed to give you information, and there's no way of knowing which information or which part of that information will drop out. Let's take an example. I was watching a TED Talk about how to get rid of pain. I don't remember all the details, even though she was a wonderful communicator. I can remember the names of all the people at the curtain company, but I don't know the name of that presenter. I don't even remember any of the graphics, though I do remember her story of being on a plane and having a beer and a vibrator. Her main goal was to get one point across, which is what she did. That one point was that there is a way to get rid of pain without medication. That's the part of the information I can recall. Somewhere down the line, if I need those details, I can search for the TED Talk and then I can assimilate the information. It then becomes a permanent part of my memory. And that's memory in a nutshell. So let's summarize what we've covered. The first part is that you can't have a bad memory, especially with names, because you already remember 100 to 200 names. Try it out. You just do. As much as you might deny it, you already have a lot of names in your memory. So you have a decent memory and you have a system to remember all of those names. The second part is when you're learning something new and you think, I'm forgetting all of this stuff, and you're not forgetting anything. What is happening is that there are dropouts. You get new information, the brain is not able to assimilate that information, and we'll go into that in another podcast, but it's not able to assimilate that information. So it holds on to the bit that it can remember, and that's what you remember, and the rest of it just falls down because it's too much information. And that's not because you have a good memory or a bad memory, it's just too much. Which is why we have the summary in the first place, because it's easy to forget where we started, even though this is just 10 minutes long. So what's the one thing that we can do today? Well, the easiest thing to do today is to stop saying that you can't remember people's names and that you have a bad memory with names. What you need to say is that I have a good memory, and then you work out a system to remember those names. And for everybody, that system is going to be different, but you will remember names. You'll remember hundreds of names, and people will be astounded when you remember their names, and they will love you for it. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in psychotactics land. One of the things that we're planning to do is have a workshop in Lisbon, Portugal. And this is either in April or May next year. We don't know what the workshop is going to be, how long, or how many people. But if you're in Lisbon and you know of a good venue, or you want to come to a workshop where you don't know what we're going to cover, well, send me an email. It's shown at psychotactics.com. And I'll say bye for now, and we'll see you in the membership site at 5000 BC. You'll remember that, won't you? Bye-bye. Still listening? A friend of mine told me that when she met her husband, she didn't ask his name, or she forgot his name, and I was like, this is bizarre. How could you like someone and not remember their name? And then I remember when Renuka and I met, and it was at a Christmas dance, and she was wearing red, and I started to call her Santa Claus. There's no reason. It was just flirting, I guess. And we danced through the night, and then she went to her house, and I went to mine. And then several days later, I thought, I should give her a call. Except when I called her number, her father picked up the phone. And he said, who do you want to speak to? And it's at that point I realized that I didn't know her name. And I couldn't say Santa Claus. So I just disconnected the phone. And there you have it. That's the story. Bye for now. See you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye.